coordinated action, so that's great. Our next speaker is another General Secretary. That's Ian Lawrence. Ian Lawrence is the General Secretary of the National Association of Probation Officers, and their union has now come in behind the National Shop Stewards Network, and we're proud to have their logo again. So, Ian Lawrence.
Linda, thank you. Welcome, comrades, and I'm delighted to have the opportunity to come and address you this afternoon. Just thinking about what Dave said about too many victories, at least Bob Crow and I got something in common today, that we all managed to avoid defeat yesterday. They didn't play. Well, eyes down then for what's going to be a historic Congress, no question about that. One that comes against the backdrop of continuing economic austerity. That much we know. I've been enthused, inspired, and of course, like you, deeply concerned about some of the things I've heard here today. The notion that the TUC cannot rally itself to support a current strike, as described by Ronnie, is quite reprehensible in my view, and everything and anything needs to be done this afternoon to reverse that decision. So the economy is hurting, we know, but it sure ain't working. We come to Congress against the backdrop of another threat of regional war. And I actually was proud of the decision taken by the Parliament the other week that chose not to repeat the mistakes of the past, to actually take stock of the fact that launching several £1 billion worth of cruise missile hardware, which will no doubt cause the loss of more innocent lives, because we all know the Americans couldn't hit a cow's arse with a banjo. Right? But more seriously, a decision that may be signalled a change of tack. If you don't have dialogue, you'll never get anywhere. And I think on the day, 2 days afterwards, when the Chief of Greater Manchester Police said, I haven't got the resources to actually investigate 40% of the crime in my area, yet there are people queuing up to press the cruise missile button just days before. There's the contrast, colleagues. That's the contrast. That's the sort of thing we are speaking up against. So Britain continues to be run by a combination of multinationals and self-interest politicians. Nothing changes there, nor does the systemic attack on the public sector, as you've heard so graphically today. So what does the union movement need to do? Does it start a new party, as Bob suggests?
Yes.
Does it seize back the Labour Party? No. Or does it organise a general strike? Yes. Or all three? Well, I'll be honest with you, and I must be candid with you, we do not yet have a mandate within NAPO for any of those scenarios. That does not mean to say I don't have a mandate for doing nothing. Because in the context of the struggle we're involved in, my members in the probation service, not the family court section at this stage, the probation service, are facing a massive attack by another villain of the piece, one Mr. Chris Grayling, he of the legal aid cuts, he of the failed work plan programme, a politician, let me tell you, every bit as abhorrent as Eric Pickles. He's just a bit taller. Now this is a guy who wants to sell off a service. You might not have heard of it very much. And you know why? Because it goes about its work effectively and skillfully and professionally. It actually defends communities from the worst offenders. It turns the lives around of hundreds of thousands of people who would find themselves through the revolving door of recidivism were it not for my members in probation. Grayling thinks it's right for profit. He hasn't got the message, there's no profit in justice, but that doesn't make him change his mind. He's been told by his growing army of civil servants, over 200 now, trying to squeeze this ridiculous timetable through, that it won't work. He's got his own risk register, which he refused to release to the public despite an FOI request, which is rejected, that says there are 15 reasons why you really want to do this, Minister. Yet he cracks on. This at the same time, as he still refuses to bar the likes of Serco, yes, them again, G4S, you know all about them, don't you? There are alleged malpractices in electronic monitoring and overcharging on delivering prisoners to the courts. Now let me tell you something. If one of my members was accused of fraud, they'd be suspended on their ear and investigated. What has he done? we're looking at these. If they're found to be guilty, they may not get contracts and probation. Well, I say that's disgusting. And I say any minister that takes that decision is unfit for purpose. So NAPO is now moving ever increasingly towards an industrial action scenario, and that will please our members. We've been banging it in my ear for ages now. But we're not going to do that alone, as Steve has said. And that's why we're building alliances with the POA, with PCS, with Unison, whose members also work in probation service, to bring together a coordinated week of action in the justice sector. And if that just so happens to coincide with the other action described today, so much the better, and we'll be agitating for that. So I don't have the mandate for a general strike, but I kind of get the drift. So we're heading that way. So the message isn't only about what this government are doing. There'll be much said or not said about the links between Labour and the trade unions this week. Well, let's have a message loud and clear for Ed and his cohorts. And it's simply this. You can't win power by standing there saying nothing. You can't say nothing about your tax on legal aid and expect to get elected. You can't continue to ignore the scandalous tax gap, 120 billion by anyone's estimate, is uncollected or evaded in taxes, despite the efforts that we've read about. You can't do that, and you can't continue to allow the privateers to get away with blue murder in the justice sector and elsewhere. So we need a government in waiting that's prepared to speak out and do things. And that too is the central message of what we're about. So comrades, my contribution to today's debate hasn't given you quite what perhaps you were expecting. But I know there's a feeling within my union that we need to maintain that debate, and we certainly need to coordinate the action that we've been talking about. Because my members face the fight of their lives. Ordinary, working people, decent people. We've only been on strike twice in 101 years. That says it all, doesn't it? Now being threatened by this pernicious government. So the struggles ahead have not been our making, but there are struggles there that we must face, and we intend to play our part in that. We're facing a coalition without scruples, an administration that, quite frankly, is, like its ministers, no longer fit for purpose. In the coming weeks, we should not only stand together in terms of industrial action, we should send out one message to Cameron as well. The trade union movement thought of big society long before you thought it was hip, David. We are big society and will continue to be in the future. Thank you very much.